Hello everybody, this is the Chris's, and this is the Plural Positivity World Conference. This is our session on projection, protection, and plural power. And we have a blend of Amarissa, Aliessa, and Driel working on this presentation together. So, as an introduction, what is it that we're trying to do here? We understand that many plurals are extremely vulnerable in their lives. This ends up translating into extra anxiety, extra vulnerability, and having, let's say, drawing unwanted attention from possible predators. So we want to help teach people how to better protect themselves so that you make less of an available target for somebody who is looking to do something bad. So we're going to start out with a full introduction and then some disclaimers, talking about the difference between vulnerable situations and fitting a vulnerability profile. We are not victim blaming here, so we're going to go into that in the disclaimers, but we're also going to talk about how this does fit into our lives. And, as much of a shame as it is to have to change ourselves to fit an awful world, it is unfortunately something that we have the ability to do once we know that we can do it. We're going to talk about why and what it is about being plural and multiple that makes us fit a vulnerability profile a little bit more than the next person, perhaps. We're going to talk about physical things that we can do with our body that may help to ameliorate our fitting into a vulnerability profile to the world. And then we're going to go into some of the more woo or spiritual or psychic or mental things that you can do in terms of changing attitudes or changing how you fit into your body and the world in an energy way or in a psychic way. But we'll start out the whole presentation with the more grounded physical things and get to the more abstract and more, for want of a better word, psychic things. Not magical psychic, just mental psychic things that you can do that can have an effect on how you present in the world and thus whether or not you're targeted. And then we're going to just wrap up and give a summary of everything with some next steps and resources for people. So, to introduce the topic, imagine that your energy has, we talk about in the survivor community different reactions to things that happen in the world. You have fight, you have flight, you have freeze, and so on. So we have all these different reactions that we have, and some of them collapse our energy field in, kind of like trying to look as small as possible. So sometimes we actually collapse in on ourselves. And when we do, nature abhors a vacuum. You may have heard this saying before. Nature abhors a vacuum. When you pull all of your energy in, when you pull your personal space, which is an invisible field or boundary around our body, when you pull that in, when you pull in your shoulders, when you take smaller breaths so that you're not expanding your chest as much, when you're all hunched in, when you're trying not to look tall, you're trying to look really small, you're pulling energy in. And that can pull negative energy outside of you into your personal space and in your field of energy. So there's something about trying to be small or to present a small target, attempting to be invisible or hide or, be small so that you can have, you can hide in a smaller space, or having a freeze reaction that sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. If somebody is actively looking for someone to target, they may notice this. They may be looking for it. And they're looking for insecurity. They're looking for an easy victim. So how is it that we come into the world as if we actually own some space in it, as if we deserve to be there? So that, I think, is basically what it is that we're talking about in this session. Not saying that that the person who is vulnerable is to blame, but to say we don't have to be as vulnerable, and we can stand in our power, and we can put forth a different attitude in the world that maybe sometimes will help protect us from people looking for someone to victimize. So here's the disclaimers. We are absolutely not victim blaming. We are absolutely mind-blowingly not victim blaming. Obviously, if somebody is seeking targets, they are not a good person, and it's entirely their fault. And unfortunately, because they exist in the world, we're suggesting that people protect themselves better. So the idea is to prevent attracting their unwanted attention and to be less likely to be a target. So we would like to say, please do not put yourself purposefully in dangerous situations, thinking that these techniques alone will protect you. That's not true. But, for example, when we had to walk through 42nd Street back in the days of kung fu theaters and drug deals in every shadow, we used these techniques and we walked through without being anything more than asked if we wanted to buy something. But we have used these techniques when we found ourselves in a situation that was not safe. But we also did not ever use these in the direct face of somebody already targeting us. We did these preventatively. So, that said, so we're not saying that it's okay to protect yourself so that someone else becomes a victim. In this case, unfortunately, if we are a victim, that doesn't prevent somebody else from being a victim. That person looking for a victim may attack us and someone else. Our protecting ourselves may make them decide tonight's not a good night. Maybe they won't find another person. We can't make ourselves vulnerable to stop someone else from getting targeted. The whole idea of, not dressing in sexy clothes will then mean that somebody else is the one that gets targeted. I don't know. There's just this really messy idea out there that there's something wrong with protecting yourself because then somebody else might be targeted. No, really protect yourself. And hopefully the other person who might have been targeted also protects themselves. So you may be in some way preventing them from having two victims. I don't think that it's going to be you or the other person, the other victim. It's probably both. So there may be some ideas in here that include switching. And when you're switching without a good internal community or equality, it can lead to resentment within your system. So work on building up your internal community and working together on things. A protector, what did we write? Who knows what we were writing? Everyone in your system can be a protector. Okay, yeah, we've mentioned this somewhere else too. Everyone in your system can be a protector and in their own way. And in this seminar, we're going to be talking about things that will help more people in your system take on protector roles. Whoever is front is a protector at the moment. And so the more skills they have as a protector, the better they're going to protect everybody. So there's no need to resent when you're leaning on protectors and they get more front time because you're in vulnerable situations and so you want them to protect you. Or the protectors don't have to feel weird about other people in your system getting better at protecting themselves. You know, that this is all good. The more of you that are capable of drawing and defending boundaries and keeping bad things from happening, the better. So that said, we're going to piss people off. You know, there are a type of bully and abusers who cannot be dissuaded by the tactics we're talking about. Sometimes standing up to somebody just means they're going to double down on you and take your power with more force. Where there's other people looking for opportunistic opportunities and maybe dissuaded if you don't look like a good victim, there are the people who are going to insist on violating your space and stuff. And so there is a potential for some of the tactics that we suggest to piss someone off more. And if they're that type of victimizer or abuser, you may have to decide at the moment what is safest for you and your system. In fact, decide at every moment what is safest for you and your system. These are tools for your toolbox. These are not tools to always use. Use them as needed. Be flexible about it. And test them in situations that are safer before testing them in situations that are more dangerous. But hopefully some of what we're going to talk about will help increase your awareness of what's going on. And sometimes that alone, just being more aware, can be helpful. So we're going to talk about one tactic called looking for a fight. And if you're using the looking for a fight tactic against somebody else who's also looking for a fight, you know, you're using it kind of in a defensive way. It's like, you know, but maybe they are too, or maybe they're actually looking for a fight. So that could make things escalate a little faster or bump heads more or piss them off more. That said, just be careful about the bullies who are really deeply entrenched in being bullies versus the ones that are doing so kind of like peacocks and trying to look bigger than they are and, you know, shiny feathers and look, I'm so intimidating. There's vulnerable situations in which you are at risk external to your body. And then there's fitting a vulnerability profile. There are things that people do that make them look like easy targets, if you will. Somebody who takes out their wallet and flashes money on the street is a little more likely to look like a target for somebody who's looking to mug someone or take their money away. So when there were a lot of muggings in New York City, people were suggested not to be flashing their money in public. Don't look vulnerable. Don't look like a target. So this isn't to say that the mugging's not wrong or that that was going to be proof against being mugged. It was going to make it so that you weren't displaying that you would be a good target. So it's the same thing here. There are the situations we're in, but there's also the things that we are and do and project into the world that are more internal processes or what we're doing that make us a little bit more of a target or make us seem more vulnerable to the world. Whether or not we are, I mean, we're perfectly capable of switching in an instant and becoming somebody who's less vulnerable. So, but why get into the confrontation in the first place, basically? Why get into the position where that person has to front in order to protect us, or we're already in a confrontation with someone, and now they have something to lose if they don't succeed, so now they're going to be perhaps more aggressive towards us. So I want to make sure that we understand that these are two different things. One is the external circumstances we don't really have very much control over, and the other thing is something we have some control over. It's not always going to succeed, but it's good to be aware of what things we can switch up and change in order to perhaps seem like less of an available target. So the what and the why. Plurals and multiples are just simply more vulnerable in the first place inherently because, or at least most or many of us are. Because we have damaged boundaries. Many of us have damaged boundaries. We also tend to have collapse reactions to abuse triggers. Not all of us, but, some of the people listening to this definitely do. I said there's going to be differences between who fronts and not, but I've seen situations where a protector is fronting, something triggers someone else to come forward, and now all of a sudden their whole boundary system collapses. So now they're extra vulnerable. Also, many plurals and multiples exude anxiety, or maybe we visibly project some type of a vulnerability in the world. So it's good to be authentic, and very important to be authentic, but it's also important to not exude that vulnerability when you're not safe. So one of the rumors on the street, if you will, is that there are some organized abusers, or people who are long-term abusers, who may be very versed in spotting dissociative tells, even in a public situation with complete strangers, so that these people are actually picking targets in the public. Maybe they're not spotting dissociative symptoms, but maybe they spot the other tells that we were just talking about, the anxiety and so on. So those first impressions are really important for deterring that extra bit of interest or being stalked by assholes, if you will, right from the start when we're out in public spaces. So how we comport ourselves, how we carry ourselves can make a difference even when we're just out in public. We'll talk about how to protect yourself in a moment. We're talking about some of the problems right now. There's also, we are going to talk about it right now. We're looking at our outline like, oh yeah, we're flipping back and forth between our notes. Sorry. So to deter that first impression problem, one of the solutions is to be more connected. One of the problems with being dissociated is that often we are not in the here and now. We're not really connected to our body. We're not really in the time. We're not really in the place. So when we're disconnected like that and out of alignment with the world, it's a sign of vulnerability to those who know what to look for. Or even maybe some people may just sense it, in some kind of visceral way. When you're staring off into space and floating around, you are not anchored in the here and now. Anything, a stiff breeze can knock you over, both literally and figuratively. You're just not there, and people really can sense that there's something off. So that extra sign of vulnerability, it was protective back when, but it's not necessarily protective now. So it's a good thing to work on being in your body, aware of your body, and aware of your surroundings. And I know this is like a huge, huge, tall order for people with dissociative disorders, but it is a reason and a good inspiration to work on it. And if you can conjure up a time to be more anchored, it's when you're in vulnerable places, when you're out in public, when you see a weird situation. That's when you want to lock and load and be completely, as much as possible, in the here and now, potentially in your body, or as we like to say, 3 inches to the left. Really close to your body, monitoring your body, knowing what's going on around your body, even if you're not fully in it, because we have chronic pain and we know what it's like. Not all of us can physically be in our body, whether it's somatic flashback issues or it's pain and discomfort and dysphoria and so on. But to be really close to your body so that you know what's going on with it and around it, and you're still anchored in the same time and space as your body. So be really, really close to it. You don't have to be completely in it, but be really, really close. So that's a protective mechanism. So when you're in any kind of a situation when you know you may not be safe, try not to space out, try not to leave the area, try to be anchored, or switch to somebody who can be. If that's better for you, then work on setting up an agreement, I guess, ahead of time. Like, when I feel like this, can I step out of front and you step in? And it might take time to work it out, but that's like always a good first step is actually negotiating it. We have a lot of if-then mental, programs or mental deliberate triggers, if you will, that we have made. They're called implementation intentions. We clearly visualize a situation and then what our response is going to be. There's an article on this. It came from a psychology paper a long time ago, but there's an article about it, implementation intentions, on the Kinhost website. So that would be a good resource if you're interested in making these mental programs of if-then responses to, I guess, external stimuli. If this situation happens, can you please switch in? Kind of thing. So now that you're aware that perhaps you're going to be closer to your body in these situations, let's talk about the body more. There's physicality, and how our physicality, how we move and breathe within the physical world can affect how we appear to others and whether or not they see any opening, I guess, for victimizing us. So our bearing and our posture can play a role in conveying that regardless of our age, gender, or ability, that we are capable, alert, and confident. And it goes right along with what I was saying about being in the here and now. You can actually look like you're more grounded and in the here and now. You could even be faking it. Don't tell anyone. You could fake that you're completely alert and confident in the here and now. Certainly better than not, not seeming alert and confident. So then our posture, one way to immediately help is to not physically fall into yourself, if you will. Now, I know physical limitations aside, whatever this means for you and your body, not everybody can stand up ramrod straight, and that's okay, but there is definitely going to be a posture that works for your body better than a posture that does not, if you have control over it, or even how you gesticulate your hands, or where are you putting them in your lap, or how you hold your head. Any of those things that you can control, you can put into a better position to seem more in control, rather than lackadaisical or out of control, or falling into yourself, or making yourself small. So whatever an upright and alert posture is for you and your body will help show that you are connected to your body and your environment. And along the same lines, breathing. There is an autonomic nervous system function with breathing, that when we're in a panic state and we're anxious, we breathe more shallow and from the top of our lungs. And when we're more calm and confident and more in our power, we're going to breathe more from our diaphragm and our belly, and just breathe lower and slower. So if you can practice this is definitely a skill that you can take home as homework. Practice this different kind of breathing and feel how you feel. When you breathe lower down and from your belly, you make your belly button move, if you will. Then if you're just moving your chest and keeping your abs still, how does that, the top of your chest, and breathing much more shallow, how does that feel? You have to breathe faster if you're breathing from the top of your lungs only, and you can breathe slower and deeper if you're breathing from your belly button. So it's visible how fast somebody's breathing, whether they're breathing shallow or they're breathing from their belly. You can see these things. It may not be something you notice, but it is seen, and people subconsciously take in these cues, even if they're not looking for them deliberately. So the interesting thing about breathing, and you'll learn this in yoga classes and so on, is that actually changing how you breathe changes your energy field. It changes your autonomic nervous system, changes from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system. It's very technical, and we'll be going into more of that kind of thing in our other class on where to source your energy. So we don't want to get too much into that, but the way you breathe actually will change the quality of the energy that you are using at the moment. Your hormonal systems and things like that will shift if you change how you're breathing. So practice that, because it's really beneficial, no matter where you are, to lower your anxiety level by breathing deeper, by which I mean more low down on your body. Down towards your belly button. If you can get it to the point where it's as far down as possible, to where you kind of feel like it's even affecting your lower chakras or your pelvic floor and so on, it's better. Get as much of your lower abdomen engaged in it as possible to help calm you down and get you out of an anxiety phase. So do practice breathing as part of the overall physicality of your self-defense And now we get into the energy part of it. So we were just talking about energy with breathing and how it changes your personal energy sourcing and so on. This stuff is more about that inner engagement portion, the stuff that's not as visible physically on the outside, but it's still undeniably real, even if it's hard to measure or quantify, or if it's something that's basically invisible. So we all respond to these energetic differences or these mental internal differences in other physical people, even if we can't explain them or see them with our eyes. We all respond to these different factors, if you will. So sometimes, as plurals, we can switch in order to affect our vulnerability level, or to be a protective mechanism. We call this the I'm a bad choice idea. It's a way that we deter predators just simply by who is fronting right now. Whether it's protectors or tough guys or people with backbones of steel or somebody in our system who's really just out looking for a fight. So sometimes we just deter predators by who we're fronting as, which is so entirely a mental difference. Sometimes it does some of those posture things and the breathing things, and so sometimes those portions are evident, but there's still that ineffable something about being someone else that has it, that has that confidence, that has that chutzpah, if you will, that toughness, that the little extra spark in them that just says, you don't want to fuck with me. you know, I'm a bad choice. I am just not, you mess with me and it's going to be a bad day. So that deters predators. It just does. Whether anybody could put a specific finger on it, there's just something about that extra hard look in the eye, or that eyebrow, or that way that they walk or talk or move, or the energy they exude, that just says, I am a bad choice. Don't mess with me. So, now I'm trying to catch up on my notes. So again, predators and abusers are always to blame for what they do, and our actions and our attitude can be leveraged to protect ourselves. So we used this in New York City in the 80s and 90s, along with psychic projection, and many of these other techniques, because on the outside we just looked like a pretty frail young woman. And we didn't only stick to safe areas. Sometimes we lived in unsafe areas, and sometimes we had to get from point A to point B, and the best... Okay, so for all of the bad reputation that 42nd Street has, you didn't want to walk across town on 41st Street or on 43rd Street. You'd be better off walking right down the yellow line in the middle of 42nd Street than walking in the streets adjacent to it. As bad as the lights were, because they would shoot out the lights, as dark as the doorways were that the drug dealers were hanging out in looking for someone to sell something to, it was the better choice than the dark, completely abandoned streets next to it. So we didn't always stick to the safe areas, and we were kind of sick of the catcalling and the comments to smile and the requests to talk to strangers. And we found that who is fronting really does make a difference. So we let them do their job. You can also not be one of those people. You may not be a protector, a tough guy, have a backbone of steel, or be looking for a fight. But you can adopt a badass attitude and glean some of those protections of coming off as, I'm a bad choice. So you can take a page from their book and have them help you learn how to walk prouder and talk louder. And in this way, everyone in your system is a protector, or can be. So once you think beyond yourself as an individual system member and realize that if you are fronting, you are your system mate's first line of defense, maybe that will help you decide to learn how you can contribute to your group's safety. So that's it. One of the things that we've found and that we were taught in the Psychic Self-Defense class, actually, is this whole idea of pushing. Fear draws in energy. We talked about this at the beginning. We're collapsing in. Our energy is being sucked into us, kind of like we're collapsing in like a black hole, right? And drawing all this energy, and all the light is spilling into the black hole. We are pulling all this stuff into us. Well, the idea of pushing is, instead of acting in fear and drawing all of that energy in, you do the opposite. You push your energy out. You take whatever energy, and we'll talk about that in a moment, you take whatever energy it is and you push it out, and you just visualize pushing your energy out in a big bubble around you. And this way, hopefully you're repelling the people looking for an easy target, looking for that collapse, looking for that black hole, who want to actually violate your boundaries. So when you push out and make a boundary. Make it a meter away from you. 3 feet, a yard, as long as your arm's extended out from your body. Right? To your fingertips, on each side and all over you. So push that energy out. There's energy projection, if you will, which is kind of like that pushing out. So whether or not you believe in it, the aura or the energy that people read, quote unquote read on people who are panicked, is either chaotic or collapsing in on itself. And that pull pulls in the predators. We're saying the same thing. But in the Psychic Self-Defense class, she taught us to visualize that you're in an egg or a globe of light. She liked to pick gold, but pick a color that feels right to you. So you can push your energy out, like we were saying before, or you can also picture it. You can visualize it or sense it or feel it, hear it. You could have it be you're surrounded by orchestral music or whatever. If hearing is your major way of quote unquote visualizing things. So she suggested gold, and we're not convinced that it has to be any specific color. It can be a rainbow, it could be silver, it could be glitter, whatever it is that protects you. So you're going to visualize it as whatever kind of energy, however if you taste it as strawberries, I don't care. Push the energy out into a protective field around you. And that's one of the things that we were doing on 42nd Street, was that golden globe idea and pushing our energy out, as well as the, you don't want to with us. That was definitely another major one that kept us safe, was you really don't want to with us. So other visualizations you might be able to use that say you're not a good choice might be similar to how some animals or insects defend themselves. So your energy visualization can be that you're surrounded with barbed wire, or that you're poisonous, or whatever it is, or even just saying to yourself the mantra, I'm not a good choice. with confidence and conviction, kind of like I just said. I'm not a good choice. Period. No question mark there. And then there's the question of what kind of energy do you tap into? So we're talking about what the energy looks like, what it feels like, how you visualize it, and so on. But also, you don't want to source the energy for your protective bubble in fear. You don't want to use panic energy or anxiety energy to fuel that bubble. So we're going to talk about this much more in our other session where we talk about the energy that we use just in daily life being anxiety energy and so on. We get so used to that being how we fuel our projects and everything that we do. We're going to talk about alternatives to that, so we're going to mention it here as well. So many of us source our energy for living in what we call panic energy. It's fear, anxiety, caffeine. It's on the adrenaline or epinephrine side of the biochemical metronome, if you will, or whatever it is. It's like a spectrum of internal hormonal choices and metabolism. And so it's exactly the nervous, fearful victim energy that we were talking about earlier, and just taking it from the biological and hormonal angle. So by hook or crook, start to choose some kinds of passion energy, which is the polar opposite of panic energy, is passion energy. So start to try and source some things in your life out of passion or love, by finding a why. Why are you protecting yourselves? Why is it that you don't want to be a victim? So what we suggest, if you cannot love yourself enough just to protect yourself as an individual within your system, you can also find it in your heart to be protective of others in your system, and do it for your headmates out of love. Do it to protect your littles or your external children if you're a parent in body as well as in mind. So do it for yourself, your headmates, but do it out of love. Set boundaries. Defend the weak and vulnerable. Stand in your own self-loving power. And do it all in love, and it will get easier and be less tiring for you. And that about sums it up. I mean, we're going to go over, just the quick overview of what we've talked about to remind you in case you phased out in the middle of this. And want to rewind because you missed something. But at this point, we want to say, kind of what we've taught you a little bit, and then going to the resources and the practice and the next steps that you can take. So we gave you an introduction, talking about sucking the energy in and collapsing in on yourself, and how being plural makes us a little bit more vulnerable in the first place sometimes. Not all the time. We gave disclaimers about protecting yourself, not putting others in danger, not inherently, and that it's not a way of saying that the victim is to blame, you shouldn't have been so vulnerable. No, not at all. The victim is a victim. The perpetrator is a perpetrator. Period. But we would like to prevent anybody from becoming a victim, so we're putting this information out there so that you have more tools in your toolbox to protect your system. There's a difference between being in a vulnerable situation versus fitting a vulnerability profile. Sometimes we're in a vulnerable situation or position, and there is nothing we can do to change anything. Whereas sometimes somebody is looking for someone who seems vulnerable, and they can find you as a victim because you're telegraphing vulnerability in the world. And so by changing that, maybe you can change the outcome of the interactions you have in the world. And that said, one of the things we said is be careful, because sometimes there are the types of perpetrators that trying to stand up for yourself and be confident and be all, I'm looking for a fight, might escalate things. Other things we talked about are the importance of first impressions, and how we walk into a room or walk into a space, or when somebody first perceives us, they're going to make that snap judgment, and if they see us in a weak moment or in a moment of seeming vulnerable, they may tag us and start to stalk us and see whether or not they can get access to us in order to hurt us. And then one of the ways to help counter that is if when we are in spaces that we know that we may be vulnerable in those spaces, is to be much more present and aware, to be more in the here and now, so that we're aware of our surroundings, we're aware of our body, and we don't initially appear quite so spaced out and targetable. And then we went to talk about, how that bridges into physicality, being more aware of our body and closer to our body. Now we can also affect our body's posture and breathing and help seem even less like a victim. By not exuding anxiety and telegraphing that kind of collapsing in energy and so on with our body and our posture and our breathing, we can seem more confident and more in control, and thus less like a victim. And then we went into the more internal and mental aspects of this. Energy projection and the choice of who we are at the moment. If we can step aside and let a protector take front, or if we can choose to be more of a protector for the others in our system ourselves, then we may turn away bad guys because they'll see us as a bad choice. We talked about pushing energy out. So instead of pulling energy in and pulling negativity towards us, we're pushing positive energy out and pushing energy field around us and creating a boundary just with energy alone that will hopefully help to protect us. Then we talked about, what did we talk about? Oh, we talked about the choices of how to visualize that energy. So now we've got this bubble around us. So how do we hold that space? How do we hold that energy around us? What can we do to help us remember to keep it there? We can have visualizations. It doesn't have to be visual, but I'm going to call it a visualization for what it looks like, feels like, tastes like, sounds like, and keep that around us in a big bubble. Where do we source the energy for this bubble? Well, the best choice, it's not the only choice, but the best choice is to source it in love, to have passion or love for what we're protecting, whether it's we're protecting ourselves in self-love, or we are protecting our body, or the kids in our head, or the other people in our system. Whatever it is, we're protecting for love. So we can source the energy for that bubble, for the visualization, and so on, in love. And then here we are. So, next steps. If you're interested in the person who initially taught us the bubble technique and the pushing energy out technique, most of the rest of this stuff is our own content, but their idea influenced our talk on this. That would be Elizabeth K. Stratton, the author of Seeds of Light, and there's a whole chapter in there on psychic self-defense. She gave a talk back in the early 90s at the New York Open Center, and we were in the room as a volunteer, I believe, or we paid for the session. Either way, it was enlightening for us and definitely changed our life. Definitely for the better. And so that would be one thing that's possible for you to do. Another thing, you could do research on boundaries, or talk to your therapist, or take a class on it, or read a book on it, and work on boundaries. Having broken boundaries, having defenseless boundaries, having holy boundaries, boundaries with big holes in them, is not healthy, and it definitely leads to the potential for being victimized more. We write on our website at kinhost.org about empathy and boundaries. We have a podcast episode on boundaries and empathy. Please avail yourself of all of the resources you can on doing boundary work, and love yourself enough to defend yourself. So you can look into, other people have stuff on psychic self-defense. Some of it is more or less woo than others. And so you can look up things on it and judge whether or not there are tools that are available in those works that apply to you or not. But also look into building self-esteem, confidence building, actual self-defense classes, physical self-defense classes. Like, you will be more confident if you know what to do if there is a problem. And work on testing these ideas when you're able to, so that, you can build them into habits, or you can decide which ones work for you and which ones do not. So test them, build a case for practicing, and some of these things you can practice alone at home when you're completely safe, and some of these things you can test, when you're at the grocery store. I mean, it's not that hard to find, let's say, low-risk situations in which you can practice some of these things and see how they work, and see if these can become habits for you as much as possible, so that you have these skills ready in your toolkit whenever you need them going forward. All of that said, we deliver this with a great amount of love and wanting you to be safe. And, we have Buck fighting all of the bad guys, and so here we are. We're just trying to bolster all the good guys. That's what we're here to do. Marissa, we thank her also for a lot of the material in this. She is one of our protectors. She is a badass. She's definitely got the stick up her butt and the straight spine and the attitude and she's got it all going on, and it would really, really be a bad day if anybody her. So she is like our role model from age 16 on of our quintessential don't with me, baddie. And so her input on this session has been really vital for us. So we really give her a lot of love and thanks, and we give that to you too. We really want people to be able to defend themselves, plural or not. I mean, the session could easily apply to singular people. So we just want people not to be victims anymore, and that's us and everybody else as well. So please take this information in good health and apply it and learn what you can. Expand your skills well beyond what I've talked about today, and go take good care of yourselves.